Just wanted to say before the video started, thank you so much for all the recent support on Into the Darkness Chapter 1. It really means a lot to me. I wasn't actually going to post a Chapter 2, but due to some recent support from some close friends of mine, I decided to go through with it. Now, whether or not I continue posting the rest of my book onto YouTube is still up for debate, but if it continues getting the same support that it has recently, I will consider it. Now, onto the story. Chapter 2 is narrated by Evelyn, so that there is no confusion. Just want to clarify that before the story started, because it will also be narrated by yours truly. Now, with that being said, please sit back, relax, and enjoy Chapter 2 of Into the Darkness. There was too much going on. The timer never slowed its inevitable end, and the way everyone else was reacting, things were going south. Fast. I chewed on my nail nervously, a million different ideas racing through my mind, and I shot down every one of them. Why couldn't I think? Feeling the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, I stopped what I was doing and took a deep breath. We had to think of something. Caden stood to my right, his thumbs tucked under his chin as he methodically tapped his fingers together. Thea ran her fingers through her black hair, brows knitted in concentration. 6 teenagers, all stuck in a room with a giant cage and some sort of demon locked inside, and no one had any idea what to do next. My head snapped to attention as a clap echoed loudly throughout the room. I saw Caden's eyes light up with a sudden realization as a grin began to form on his face. He looked at me, his eyes saying, "I've got this. Follow my lead." Curiosity plastered on my face. I nodded slowly, deciding we had nothing better to do. He glanced up at the timer, which read 7 minutes and 12 seconds, and rubbed his hands together in excitement. "Alright, I have a plan, but I'll need everyone to be on board with it," he began, looking at each and every one of us, capturing our attention. "We need to check all the possible escape routes. Leo and Evelyn, you two check the windows. Thea, double check the vent to see if there's any weaknesses in it. Arian, you do the same with the door. And, He looked at the girl, his eyes quickly scanning over her. "Could you check the floor? Maybe we could find something useful for our escape." I wasn't the only one who looked at Caden in confusion when he finished. I expected him to say more, but he didn't. The plan seemed too simple, and I was out of the loop again. But before I could take a step towards Caden, I was cut off by Arian. "That's it? What the fuck was that?" he said angrily. "And what are you gonna do, hotshot? Just stand here and boss us around?" Caden calmly took out his knife and began twirling it, obviously ignoring the tall boy. The way his brown eyes gazed at something hidden from our view told me the reason he wouldn't share more was the risk of the voice on the intercom overhearing. The tension in the air rose as Arian waited for Caden to respond, the red numbers behind him still counting down. After almost a full minute, Caden stopped spinning the blade, looking up at me, then Thea, then Arian. "I need you all to trust me. I told you I have a plan, and just because I stopped talking after the first set of instructions doesn't mean that that was the entire plan," he said calmly. I sighed in frustration. As much as I hated to admit it, Caden was right. Despite my own feelings, he gave us clear instructions and was definitely waiting for us to complete them before telling us the next step. Theo was next to break the silence, stepping forward and saying, "We already wasted a minute just arguing. I say we do what he says and then decide what to do from the—" "But what the hell is the point of that? They're obviously all locked," Leo interrupted. Thea glared furiously at the teenager, and I watched him wilt under her gaze. "Well, I don't hear you offering any better ideas," she seethed. Leo shut up quickly, making his way over to one of the windows in submission. Everyone else seemed to still be in a trance, Arian looking at me for support. I offered none, just raising my arms reflexively. "You heard the two. Get to work already. We're wasting time," I simply said. Arian shot me a look of pure betrayal, standing with his arms crossed awkwardly for a moment before storming off to the door with some choice words under his breath. My eyes found Caden, and he gave me a little smile, giving me the courage I needed to continue. I made my way over to the window, the rancid odor seeming to only intensify. I had to stop myself from gagging by grabbing my shirt sleeve and covering my nose, and even then the smell was only slightly better than before. For the few seconds that I studied the window, checking the bars for any sort of weaknesses, I could have sworn that something was watching me through the cage. The thought chilled me to the bone, and it was even worse knowing what the intercom had said. A D-class demon. Whatever the hell that was, I did not want to find out. I made my way back to the center of the room, seeing Leo already waiting there for the rest of us, his foot tapping nervously against the floor. I could tell that he was in thought, just by his posture and twitching eyes. I figured he must have been trying to figure out the rest of Caden's plan. "Find anything?" I said, breaking the moment of awkward silence, my head instinctively turning to the timer to see 5 minutes and 49 seconds stare back at me. Leo shook his head, oblivious to the world around him, and I wondered for a moment if he was thinking up his own plan. The next precious seconds seemed to pass by in slow motion, Thea running over to us with a frustrated look on her face, telling me that she found nothing as well. Then Caden appeared from the darkness, his grin still plastered on his face. The next words out of his mouth caused me to knit my brows in confusion once again, more questions popping into my head. "Let's go. We all meet by the door. I'll explain the next step when we get there," he said, not even giving us a chance to respond before turning and rushing back into the darkness. The way Caden turned his back to me and ran off without an explanation caused a massive wave, of sad familiarity, as if this wasn't the first time I was looking at his back, only struggling to catch up to the boy that I loved. I caught myself mid-thought, the realization hitting me like a brick wall. The boy I loved. I was in love with Caden. My mouth opened as if to say something, but I instead let out a shaky breath. With the help of my subconscious, I was able to learn that I loved Caden. Not like it was a huge surprise. The feeling of relief I felt when his face first came into view, the way his skinny yet strong arms wrapped around me with that scent of incense filled me with a euphoria unlike none other. Thea snapped me out of my trance, turning to me and saying in her unwavering voice, "He didn't even ask us if we found anything. It was almost like we were used as a distraction. Like pawns in his game," Leo murmured. We both turned our heads to look at him. The creepy analogy made me recoil, and Thea held a similar look of shock. "Well, let's go," he continued without looking up at us. "Can't leave the king waiting." I let the thoughts sink in, thoughts swimming around through my mind. Surely that's not what Caden thought of us. We were his friends. He doesn't just use us like some plastic figurines in a game made to only benefit the king. I shook my head. The idea was preposterous. Caden was working to get us all out of this hellhole, and he was just taking charge and not wanting to reveal too much in worry of what the intercom might do if they found out about his plan. I forced myself to believe that we were more than just puppets, and I put my trust in Caden. Whatever he had planned, it was better than any alternative I could think of. Doubt still lingered in the back of my mind, however, no matter how hard I tried to push it down. As the 1 turned into a 0, and the timer hit exactly 5 minutes, an intense wail filled the entire room. It was louder than anything I had ever heard before, and I fell to my knees as the siren reverberated off the walls and into my ears. All 3 of us dropped to the ground in pain and confusion, the sound only seeming to intensify with every passing second. My vision began to blur. I could feel a warm liquid trickle down the side of my neck, and from the corners of my eyes I saw the blackness invading into my sight. I couldn't even tell if I was screaming. My mouth was open and my eyes felt like they were about to burst. It felt like the siren was ringing for an eternity. And then it stopped. 4 minutes and 55 seconds on the dot. The wailing cut off. The ringing in my ears did not go away so quickly, however. A steady, high-pitched scream stayed inside my eardrums for another minute. I looked over to see how Thea and Leo were faring, only to be met with the identical state I was currently in. They both were in a lot of pain by the looks of things. Expressions of pain and what looked like blood stained on their hands. Before I could even get a chance to ask if they were okay, a roar emanated from the cage. It was unlike any other noise I had ever heard. Despite being dramatically less loud than the siren, it held an aura of pure evil, something not even my nightmares could produce. The sound shook me to the core, my entire body freezing up in unparalleled terror as it bellowed hideously. It confirmed that there was indeed some sort of creature lurking within the cage, but that new information did little to console me as I began to retreat as far away as I could from the thing, the primal fear of fight or flight kicking in. Thea got up first, grabbing Leo by the wrist and running up to me, taking mine as well in her other hand before sprinting towards the door. "Whatever your boyfriend's got planned, I hope it fucking works," she growled. When the door finally came into view, Arian and Caden were in a heated argument, the tension almost visible in the air, and the girl was sitting on the floor, scratching her arms furiously. "I'm not just going to slam into the door. That's freaking useless. Do you see how it is padlocked and enforced with steel?" Arian seethed, wiping away blood from his own ears. "That's exactly why," Caden said, the first signs of frustration forming on his face. "We just heard a demon scream at us from inside that cage, set to be released in 3 minutes, and you're telling me to slam into a door." Caden threw up his hands, exasperated. I could tell why Arian was upset. We all just suffered severe ear damage, and it was confirmed that some sort of creature was inside the room with us. While it did seem meaningless to repeatedly slam into a door, there had to be a reason, since Caden was telling him to do so. Racking my brain, I tried thinking of all the reasons why he would tell Arian to do this. Why a 6'3", 200-pound boy had to put all of his body weight into an object that was 10 times stronger. The only good use that would bring would be to distract whoever was watching us from something else. The laugh that escaped my lips made all 5 heads turn to me, and everyone but Caden seemed to share a confused look. It was so simple, but the way Caden was trying to get Arian to slam into the door was wrong. Caden did everything right. He read the situation perfectly. He analyzed every detail down to a T, except for one thing. I first looked at Caden, giving him a look that said get ready and that I'll take over from here. I took a step forward, ignoring the pain still resonating in my head as I crossed my arms. "So," I started, looking at Arian with an annoyed stare. "If you're going to talk all this shit to Caden, insult him freely without a plan of your own, you surely have your own plan, right?" Arian stood, jaw dropped, with an incredulous look smeared across his face. Caden took this as his cue and quietly made his way behind me, getting to work. I stood in between Caden and Arian and let out a long, exaggerated sigh. "All you do is complain. I haven't heard a single word out of your mouth that would actually help us escape this godforsaken room, but somehow, I took a moment for dramatic pause, pushing a finger into Arian's chest. "You still have the audacity to question others. I mean, seriously, I know you're a meathead, but is it that hard to slam into a door? Have you even tried it? Do you even know that it won't work?" I sneered relentlessly, hoping he would take the bait. At first, a look of hurt flashed across Arian's face, but it wasn't soon after that it turned to a look of rage. and I could see his fists clenched behind him. Fine. You really want to see me slam into this metal door? Here, he stated, not taking a moment before tucking in his shoulder and body checking the metal door. A loud bang echoed throughout the room, and Arian took a step back, wincing, but proud of himself. See, he smiled condescendingly at me, as if he were a third-grade teacher knowing that he was right and the student was wrong. I just flipped my hair, using the gesture to take a quick glance at Caden, who was still furiously at work, and I could tell that he needed more time. That's the best you got? I fired back. For the second time in a matter of moments, Arian stood dumbfounded, completely shocked by my sudden abrasiveness. There was a moment of awkward silence, and Leo kept glancing nervously at the timer, his expression that of pure terror. Guys, he stammered, looking at all of us. We have a minute left, and I don't think that slamming the door will do anything for us. He was in hysterics, and I could tell that the rest of the group was starting to panic as the realization of hopelessness was starting to settle in. Thea looked at me with fear in her eyes, and for once, the brave front that she put up seemed to be crumbling slightly as she began to think of the worst. Arian started slamming the door repeatedly, rage combined with dread as he screamed out no one in particular. "Let us out, you fucks! I don't want to die in here! Let us out!" he roared. At the word die, the other girl seemed to snap out of her catatonic state, standing up and tackling Arian. If it wasn't for the fact that Arian had 100 pounds on the girl, she might have succeeded, but all she managed to do was stop him from his distraught banging. When he turned to look at her, he saw her insanely blue eyes staring into his, her head shaking maniacally. "There is no escape. We are all going to die. Give in to the beast. It's better to let it consume you quickly," she whispered, her head tilted to the side as a grin began to spread across her face, a giggle escaping her lips. "Don't worry though, they have a nice big knife to make playtime fun." At this, Arian's face turned ghostly white, and I could hear him start to hyperventilate. Wait, it has a knife? Why didn't you say that earlier?" Thea shouted. The girl turned to Thea, giggling hysterically, keeling over until she began to cry, completely losing what little sanity she already showed us. The situation was going to hell, and I turned my gaze to look at Caden, who seemed to be almost done. "Hurry up, they're panicking," I whispered through gritted teeth. "Give me 10 seconds, was all Caden said, and I looked up to see the clock, which read 12 seconds exactly. "You're cutting it close," I responded. He just grunted, opting to focus on his work as the argument continued to ensue with the rest of the group. "How did you even know that?" Leo demanded, raising his voice. "You aren't really one of us, are you?" The girl looked up at Leo, confusion spreading across her face as she scratched so hard on her arm she drew blood. Who are you? Did she take over me again?" Leo stood, lost for words, just staring at the girl. Arian was back to slamming into the door, refusing to give up on the fact that he was going to die. Thea looked at me, shooting me another confused look before pointing her eyes down to Caden. I just shook my head, telling her not to say anything. She looked even more worried, a tight frown on her face as she glanced up at the timer. 5 seconds left. He was out of time. "I got it," Caden breathed, taking a shaky breath before looking up at me. "Let's get the hell out of here." I sighed in relief, nodding as I started to rally everyone together while Caden began kicking the wall. All right, everyone shut up," I shouted, causing everyone to look at me. I pointed to Caden, who succeeded in making a hole in the wall, big enough for us to run through. "We are getting out of here, right now." Everyone stood, still in confusion, wondering what happened. Caden watched as the timer hit 0, grabbing Leo by the collar and shoving him through the hole. "Let's go," he repeated, grabbing Arian next as a loud click could be heard from behind us, and a beeping noise started to commence as the cage door opened. As if on cue, The demon walked out of the cage. It stood 7 feet tall at full extension, easily over 300 pounds, with red gleaming eyes that bored into our souls. Even from across the room, I saw it give me an unnatural smile, stretching its massive lips to give way for the gleaming white teeth, sending a shiver down my entire body. The terror flooded through me once again as I glanced down to see the shining silver in his hand. To call it a knife was an understatement. The thing it held was more similar to a barbarian broadsword, nearly as long as it was tall, curved at the end and stained red. I forced myself out of my trance, biting my lip hard until I tasted blood. "Evelyn, we are leaving. Now!" I heard Caden scream from behind me. I turned and ran, everyone else already out of the room except for us two, and the monster behind us. Despite its size, the thing moved faster than I expected, covering half the distance between us by the time I turned to Caden. He shoved me quickly through the wall, scurrying out after me. We all stood in the hallway at an impasse, wondering which way to go as the girl screamed, "Right!" and we all quickly followed her down the long hallway as the monster barreled into the wall behind us, its blade missing Caden's back by mere inches as we ran into the darkness.